Now, if you're not aware, I run an online platform called Beat Academy that aims to provide professional guidance and mentorship opportunities for aspiring artists and music producers, helping them take their next step with producing their music. And one of the things I often do on Beat Academy is invite leading industry professionals so that they can chime in with their insights and helping our Beat Academy community grow by asking them questions and going over several subjects that we normally deal with in today's music industry. For this call, I invited good friend of mine, Grammy Award producer Federico Vindver. He's worked on projects such as Coldplay, Kanye West, Christina Aguilera, Timberland, and so much more. So I gathered a couple gold nuggets from that call and decided to want to share that with you. What advice do you have for landing sync deals? Now, we'll little sync. Have you dabbled a lot in any sync stuff?
Well, actually, a lot of the tracks that I did when I worked with Kanye on his latest album, they actually got big syncs. And I think the way the sync world, I mean, I work with some other friends that are pretty big in sync as well. And I have to say that nowadays I feel like sync people, for what I know, is looking for syncing a lot of artists' tracks. So I have friends that have gotten amazing syncs by doing something as, okay, let's just make a band and we call whatever, the Bastards. And we put a track on SoundCloud and that's our track and we do pictures. And now everything they do is tracks for sync, but the sync people kind of see them. I'm like, oh, they're a band. Let's put that on versus sometimes it's an unknown person doing a track.
Oh.
And a lot of the tracks that I got in sync actually happened to be tracks that I worked for other artists that got sync on different, I worked with this other band called Vintage Trouble. We did a song that got sync in a bunch of shows. That's as far as I know what you can do with sync. Maybe you might have other insights. I know you have done that a lot as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, you really nailed it on the head because, and guys, this is what I want you to understand. And this is from two different perspectives coming with the same common denominator. And I've mentioned this before, the importance that when sync opportunities arise, it's not so much like, hey, we're looking for this type of instrumental, we're looking for this track. What they're really asking for is we want something that has some momentum, marquee value, and credibility that matches this style. And so when you get a sync request and it's like, oh, they're looking for a Kanye West type of beat, let me just make that beat and submit it. They can just go to a beat store or some online thing and find that on Audio Jungle or something. So they're looking for something deeper. So that is a great perspective to have. What we need to do is structure ourselves in a place where present yourself as an artist. That means having a good background. That means having like some kind of momentum that you're building up. If you're going to be an artist or create or find an artist that you can develop with that intention in mind, that will get you a lot farther than just getting a folder full of instrumentals and then trying to pitch that. Because that's really what a lot of these things guys are. So I'm glad you touched on that. It was really good. Okay, here's another question from Giovanni Salas. What advice do you have for an independent artist with no money from your producer perspective?
I mean, I guess it's the same advice that you can give to anybody. I guess no money is the typical situation for anybody in the music industry starting. It's very, strange that somebody has money. So that should tell you that anybody that ever did anything started like where you are starting. So that's something to keep in mind. And I'll say strive for being different and creative and not following the trend, because what happens to me nowadays is, so I get sent massive amount of music by so many people every day. So in my email, I open up, I always have I have no problem. Every time somebody hits me on social media, I have an email. Hey, send me music to this email. I always like to listen. You never know what you're going to get. You get some happy surprises sometimes. But in general, 9 out of 10 times is usually somebody making trap beats or trap samples and the same exact music over and over. So anytime somebody sends me something that's not a trap beat, I'm usually like, oh, cool. Who are you? Let me check you out, That's something to be said, that if you're an artist and you want to break in, I think you need to try to do something a little bit different than everybody else. And if you're doing, let's say, trap, I mean, you have to be absolutely insanely good, better than anybody that's doing it. And that's the only way you're going to get that attention. But I feel that I mean, I don't want to tell people lose what you love to do. I mean, if you really love to do trap, then go for it. But if you're gonna go in the lane of something that's already so popular, so many people is doing, you are forced to be better than anybody else or as good. And there's no other way around it. I mean, I think it's funny because people a lot of times ask, how do you get placements? Or as an artist, how do I connect with a good producer? The question, that answer is always the same. It's like, you just have to have great music. I don't know anybody that ignores great music. The problem is, like, sometimes we might think that what we do is amazing and it's great, and maybe it's not. Maybe it's not that great, and people is not resonating. But I can guarantee if you make an incredible song with crazy amount of feeling and truth, and as good as you can do it, it will transcend. That's why sometimes the techniques are irrelevant in some ways, because you can learn how to, I don't know, EQ a vocal, but how good is what you're trying to say? What it's like, you're trying to EQ a crap vocal or a crap song? Like, it doesn't make sense. Sometimes people send me stuff that is so raw but so great, And
Yeah.
Kanye is funny because he reacts so much to that. Like, when I started working with him, I will try to make everything sound great and mix it and put mastering and try to be loud, and then he might not react, and then I'll have the most raw stuff where I'm not even putting a freaking limiter or anything. It's the softest waveform or the most distorted one, but he had something and he reacts like crazy to that. He doesn't care, and I feel then I started becoming that way myself.
How do you set boundaries for yourself, Fetty, when you're working on a demo? You just did a demo beat, raw. It's so raw. Kanye turns around, loves it. You two track it so you can even put vocals. What I mean by that, guys, is he's literally just bouncing what the person's hearing. So he's got a basic beat, maybe a sample beat. Now, how do you slap your hand from adding too much or going back to tweaking it? Because in your mind, you're thinking, well, this has no compression. There's no EQ on every channel. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
How do you balance that dance between here's this demo beat and now how do we enhance it but not lose the feeling?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And again, something that I learned with and with Timbo, and even with the Coldplay guys as well, is that initial, greatness of the first time you did it. Sometimes it's so easy to kill that vibe, because honestly, even the smallest move
Yep.
of a thing, like turning your kick drum up 2 dB, it might change the feeling of it completely. So one thing that I always do, always save your original version of what you do. That's something that it could be a big thing. Like, sometimes you might have it, you start working on it, you didn't save that original, you can never get back to it, you're stuck with that 2 track. So I always make sure that I save that original vibe, and not, so I don't have to think about it anymore. And then when it comes to actually working on it, one technique that I use a lot is I never add anything else. I just work only with the materials that are there. So for example, if I'm working with, let's say it's just a sample or a sound, let's call it a sound with a kick and snare and a hat, I just stick to that. Okay, well, the sound on this other part, I'm going to maybe pitch it down, and I'm going to do this to the kick drum. I'm going to this verse, the hats are going to be panned on this side, then they're going to be panned here. And another thing that I learned from Kanye that's a very interesting process, he takes, let's say, a beat or a track, and he goes almost bar by bar on Pro Tools and mutes everything that's not essential to it. So think about this. If you make a track, what is the element on that track that if you take it out, the whole thing falls apart? There's always one thing or two that are like, well, without that, there's nothing. I mean, let's say you're talking about Promiscuous, like, if you take the lead, if you take that out, there's no Promiscuous. Like, that thing is just like so classic. The drums, there's little things. So somebody like might say, well, that pad in the background, if I remove it, it still makes sense, right? Okay, cool. Like, next. Well, if I take the hi-hats, it still sounds good. So he goes and takes almost everything out and finds that one element. And he might only have one or two elements per section. So even when you have the most basic beat, you can always make it more basic. So sometimes I work in a reductive way. That's another way to, refrain yourself from adding, because like I said, let's say you have 4 elements. Brian Eno wrote this very interesting paper for the Coldplay guys that they have it in the studio. When I was working with them, I was reading it, and he basically said, "You guys have five elements. You have drums, bass, guitar, vocals, and keys. How many permutations of those five elements exist?"
Oh,
So he
wow.
was saying it could be piano and vocals, drums and guitar, drums, bass, and vocals. So you have millions of possibilities with small amount of elements. So that's also another method that I use sometimes. What if we just do just the hi-hats and the sample? What if it's just the kick and the vocal? So I think all these things that I'm saying, they really help out to keep you from adding, like I think that's one technique. Of course, it changes from song to song. I don't know
No, yeah,
how you do it.
absolutely. Man, that is such great insight. Now, if you're looking to take your next step with your music production and you want that professional guidance to help you do so, then I want to encourage you to visit beatacademy.com and take advantage of all the resources I have available for you there. As a matter of fact, I have a free course that'll walk you through the whole process of producing your first song, getting it ready to share with the rest of the world. That course is available for you absolutely free. Just click the link below in the description box or visit beatacademy.com/produce.